Well, hello. Welcome to another installment of Theo-Thursday. Today, Vicar Callie and I are just going to have a little discussion about stewardship. We've been reading a book together, and we thought, of all the questions that we've talked about during during our discussion on the book, maybe some of them would be good to, for people to hear today. So I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you, Vicar Callie, and what do you think about stewardship, and what questions do you have?
Yeah, so stewardship is one of those big, scary words that I know I wasn't good with and still not great at. And so it's been great having these conversations together about it. And I think one of the reasons stewardship is such a scary word for people is that we're really good at talking about the time and talent part. But we're always uncomfortable when we talk about the money part.
Yeah.
So just from your experience, how do you move past that uncomfortableness?
Well, it's hard. Even, for anyone, money is a personal thing. We've made it to be a personal thing. But money is nothing more than all of our time and talent that we can exchange with other people. So money is the way that our time and talent can feed someone else in another place. So I think it's helpful for me, at least, to think about money in that way. Not as just a thing that I can own or, accumulate in an account, but as a way that I can give the things that I'm given to someone else in a really kind of amazingly efficient way. I don't have to ship grain across the ocean. I can wire money there, and it can feed someone in a faraway place. So that's an amazing thing about money.
So I think, sometimes the other part that gets uncomfortable from a leadership role with talking about money is walking that boundary line of stewardship versus fundraising. And respecting the fact that sometimes in the past churches have hurt people by mismanaging money and misusing offerings. So how do you walk that line between stewardship and fundraising and being good stewards of it?
It's a hard line, because it's very true that church is filled with human beings, and human beings make mistakes, and we break trust with one another sometimes, and then we have to rebuild trust again. So we try very hard not to break trust, meaning we have systems in place that are checks and balances on one another. But there is a fundamental difference between stewardship and talking about how we manage all that God has given us, and fundraising, which is more of a system of raising the necessary funds or capital for a project. The church sometimes does that project to project basis, but our spiritual call is to be managers of the gifts that God has given us. And in that respect, fundraising just deals with a part of our life. Stewardship deals with the whole thing.
Yeah. You mentioned, fundraising only kind of being a part, and stewardship is our whole life. And that just made me think about, in the book we're reading, the author talks about how it can be really easy for people to say, well, I give to the church, and so the rest of it's my money. I don't have to be a steward. Or sometimes other people think, oh, well, being frugal is being a good steward. And how do you talk about the theology of stewardship with not just giving to the church, but in your everyday life?
Wow, Vicar Callie, you're coming with the big questions. Again, it goes to our sense of what God has first given to us. Stewardship flows out of that sense of responding to God's graciousness. And so we live in a society that doesn't operate on graciousness. It operates on, you are what you earn, or you are what you can produce for someone else. And stewardship, in the biblical sense, is all about the intrinsic value that is placed upon us as human beings, and how we share in that value with others, so that everyone can have enough without anyone being burdened down. St. Paul talks about that in 2 Corinthians. He's taking a big offering, and he asks people to contribute to that offering for others, but in such a way that it's proportional to everyone, so that everyone is able to share in the offering, but no one has to feel in a special burden. But when all work together, then that stewardship comes together and is helpful for more people than we can imagine.
Thank you. Well, I have one last question.
Yeah.
This was just going in my head because it's something I might encounter in the future as a pastor, and maybe you've encountered it. One of the reasons we're talking about stewardship is that stewardship's or offering has been kind of down right now, and we want to make a push, but also because it's important to talk about.
Right.
When giving is down and we do these pushes, and do people ever come to you saying, well, if just everyone that didn't give gave, we'd be okay? And how do you respond to statements like that?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, that's probably true. But on the other hand, our call to stewardship is a call to us, and not to make a judgment about someone else. We don't know everyone else's circumstances. Some people have been gifted, have been put in a circumstance where they have just an ability to share resources. And that's a particular gift that is listed as one of the gifts that God gives to us, the gift of generosity. And if we have been placed in one of those situations where we have access to resources and goods that can help shape the rest of the ministry, it's a joy to be able to share those things. And so someone else may not be in that same circumstance. And so I think stewardship is always a personal thing that has communal effects. There are certain people who are just simply gifted to be generous people, and that is a calling from God. And so we want to especially, lift that gift up for people who have that ability.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, those are kind of all the questions I have.
I have a question.
Okay. I don't know we're doing this both directions.
That's
here.
right. So as an intern, and in your case, a young person who's starting out, in your kind of work life, what does stewardship mean to you?
Yeah. Stewardship is one of those scary things, right? I definitely tend to think of stewardship more in the time and talent piece of fulfilling my vocation, and how is my vocational calling fulfilling stewardship and using my time and talents well. And that's been a great thing to explore here, helping out with like the refugee project, especially learning how to be a stewardship there. But as we've been exploring this book more and talking more about this theology, it's just been really opening my mindset of what does it mean to be a steward, and really pressing onto that idea that every single thing we have is a gift from God. And that doesn't mean that if someone who has more is loved more by God than someone who doesn't have something, but that we need to be appreciative and thankful for what we have. And part of that, the author talks about this idea of like stewardship and how we acquire money, how we view money, how we manage our money, and how we spend our money. And I think that really changed my idea of stewardship as well, as like it's not just do I give, but it's also how am I getting. It's not just how do I give, but it's also how do I view money, as is it important in my life, or is it just a system we work within, and how do I utilize that?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a succinct or cohesive answer, but
I mean, this is a complicated issue because we're sort of immersed in a society that places value on human beings using a system of dollars and cents. Yeah. And the gospel calls us to move beyond that. And that's sometimes very hard for us. It's hard for me to wrap our heads around. And so we trust that God will give us the grace that we need. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for joining us on Theo-Thursday. We'll be back next week with some more.